Had to cut it in half. The November 18th meeting of the Planning Board will please come to order. We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I've been told we have a technical issue that will take a minute. Is anybody counting? Who's in charge
60,
of doing that?
59, 58.
Yeah, I'm going to just, please turn off your mics temporarily. All right, the technical issue has been resolved. Doreen, will you please call the roll?
Rick King,
Here.
Lad,
Here.
Audrey Bailey.
Here.
Rachel Henriksen,
Here.
James Hebert,
Here.
Bennett Flanders.
Here.
Thank you. I will announce the appointment of Rudy Karen to the planning board as an alternate. He could not attend this meeting, or he actually needs to be sworn in, but he will.
There it is. Come on in, Val.
Rudy can't sit here if he's not sworn in.
She said he could sit, just not vote, but it's up to you.
Rudy, if you sit here, I'm going to call on you. So otherwise you can, since you haven't been sworn in and you can't vote, technically, you're not yet enabled to participate, really.
All right.
In other words, until, we're happy to have you here. So in fact, I'm not going to recognize you, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
But if you have any questions about whatever is happening, you hold them until the very end, or you can talk to me, or you can poke Ben, and he can let you know. Ben, just make sure your microphone is turned off, please. Thank you. Let's go on to the next item, the approval of the minutes of October 21st, 2024. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second. So moved by Roger Beely, second by Rick King. Are there any corrections, changes, emendations, concerns, quibbles? Seeing none, Doreen, please call the roll.
Rick King,
Yes.
Lad,
Yes.
Audrey Bailey,
Yes.
Rachel Henriksen,
Yes,
and James Hebert.
Yes.
thank you. Minutes passed. We now have a public hearing. The subject to 4.01 is to hold a public hearing on proposed amendments to Chapter 405 zoning ordinance, Section 13 residential zoning districts, and Section 9 performance standards to update provisions related to farm stands and agricultural product stores in the rural farming RF zoning district. This is a public hearing, so I will now declare the public hearing open and ask if there is any member of the public who would like to comment on these. If there is, please approach the podium, give your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes.
There's no one online.
Hearing none, public hearing is closed. And we're going to ask staff to talk about this proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request that came to us from an applicant in April. We received a request to consider the farm stand and the agricultural product store uses limitations. The ordinance committee took a look at this in April, and then it ended up going to the Long Range Planning Committee. And just for background, farm stands are permitted in the RF district if they are associated with a commercial agricultural use, commercial animal husbandry, or commercial fishing. The products that can be sold are directly related to those uses, or they can be processed products that are made from products grown or raised by those uses. Or they can also be handmade arts and crafts. And there is a limitation though. There's a 51% limitation on how much you can retain your revenue from those products. So if you cannot prove that 51% of the revenue came from the actual product raised or farmed, then you cannot do the farm stand use. And the way the ordinance is written, it actually requires an annual report to the code enforcement officer of what those revenues are. So this request came to us from an applicant who wanted to sell a product that met the requirements of the type of use, but could not meet the 51% requirement. And so the proposal, as drafted in your attachment, is to create a special exception process if you can't meet the 51%. Now, this did go to town council in October, and the question was asked, why not just strike the entire clause? Why the 51%? Does the code enforcement officer really have the responsibility to review financials at the end of the year for farm stands? And so that is certainly an option. The public hearing process is really to get your insight into what you all think would be appropriate for this. But the red text on the screen is the proposal. And so it just basically says, if you won't meet the 51% threshold, then a special exception is required. And special exceptions, they go through our zoning board of appeals, and they have a specific requirements that they have to meet. There are performance standards that already apply to farm stands. And so on the previous slide, it's important to note a farm stand can only be 400 square feet. So it's a very limited structure. And then the farm stores can be 1,000 square feet with 500 square feet outside. So that's what we're talking about, those uses in rural farming. This is in your packet, but it's the special exception excerpt, just all of the things that the applicant would have to go through to prove up that it was an appropriate use. This, like I said, this went to the Long Range Planning Committee in June, Ordinance Committee in September, Town Council held the first reading in October. And we are scheduled for Wednesday for public hearing and second reading at Town Council. And I'm happy to answer any questions or have any discussion concerning options.
All right, I'll turn this over to the board. Well, I've got two people. Roger, I saw your finger first and then Rick second.
Autumn, I'm just kind of curious, did the council express any opinion one way or the other on this?
The only comment that was really made was, why have the 51% at all?
Okay.
Why couldn't we just make this easier?
Okay, and the other question is, do we have any sense, do other communities have a percentage figure like this for farm stands, or is this just something that Scarborough?
To be honest, I have not researched other communities, but I feel like it's a very specific Scarborough sort
Yeah,
of thing
yeah.
that came up,
Yeah.
the way it's written.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Rick Meinking.
Yeah, I don't really have a question. It's more of a comment. I'm actually in favor of removing that 51%. And my reasoning for that is these farm stands, you know, they do grow local and they do produce and they do sell what they're producing. But I also have a very strong feeling or desire to see more of buy local. And a lot of these farm stands will more or less co-op with other producers that, for example, it could be honey. And they sell honey in this store, and it does very well in this store because everybody goes to that store to buy their agricultural product, and they get some honey. So I'm thinking, or my desire would be to remove that 51% and just say special exception so that Board of Appeals has a chance to really ask the applicant some questions on what's going on here and ensuring it's meeting the other performance standards and allow Mainers to buy local in a very diverse marketplace. That's my feelings.
So currently, you don't have to go to Board of Appeals for the farm stand. The 51%,
The 51, then they would have to.
but do you want them to still go to? like,
No, if they don't have to go to appeals because we don't have that 51, then I don't want to add another layer on.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understood. So you
No,
would
no, good
strike,
point.
So you don't have to go.
I'm just saying strike that.
So there would be no special exception. It would just exist. the
A
way it
farm
is today
stand's a
with
farm
that.
stand. It's
Gotcha. Thank you.
500 square feet,
400.
400, but 1,000 and another 500 outside
For the stores.
for the stores. And cannabis isn't listed as agricultural. We have our own ordinance for cannabis.
Ben?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm kind of just wondering where this rule came from, because somebody wrote this with a specific thing in mind they were trying to prevent. And I'm wondering if they're trying to prevent, for example, like a large farm setting up stands in Scarborough and blocking out local farmers from having their farm stands. And I don't know how that, maybe they set up some giant conglomerate that buys, 10 acres in Scarborough and sets up their own quote unquote farm stand and is importing stuff for really cheap all around the country. And that actually could hurt local farmers. So I'm kind of wondering, I'm certainly in favor of permitting this specific use in this situation, but I want to make sure that we're not opening the door to something like that happening by removing this exception and allowing them to not have to go through ZBA. But if they're not 51%, they do. And if they're all coming from like, Massachusetts or something from a big farm there that's importing their products to Scarborough to try and drown out our local markets, that's kind of what I'm concerned about. And I'm wondering if that was the intention of the original rule. So I want to be sure we're not.
Yeah,
mi-
I would be
something.
speculating. I don't think that would be the intention. I also don't have a terrible amount of concern about that happening because of the size limitations. I think if you were, Rachel and I talked about this a bit today, but in my mind, if you are.
Ben, I had the same question and concern.
If you are a corn farmer in Massachusetts and you buy a farm here and you have a 400 square foot farm stand and you want to bring in your corn from Massachusetts, but you also sell some honey and some soap, I don't have an issue with that. But like I posed it to Rachel, it's really, do you all have, because that would be the consequence of, you could have other state corn with some other products. But again, you'd be limited with that 400 square foot. It would have to be associated with a commercial agriculture business in Scarborough. So, so there has to be a use established. So you couldn't just buy an acre of land and say, I'm a commercial farmer and not be a commercial farmer. Then you could do your own flower stand, but that's a side note. But this would it has to be directly related to that. So that's really the question. At first, when we talked about this, it's been quite some time. The special exception seems like a good outcome, but to be honest, I'm not sure how many revenue spreadsheets we get at the end of the year to really review.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if we really want to be in that business with the code enforcement officer, because you could basically give me anything and we would have to take your word on it. So that was one thing too.
I guess my other question is, because this wasn't previously anything that you could bring to the ZBA, and the proposal here is either to allow that to be possible or else to just strike the provision. What if we, in the interim, I know it stinks to update ordinances more than once, but if we made it, they have to go through the ZBA for a while and we then see, are we getting a lot of requests for this? If it happens one time, then who cares, right? If it happens every other week and everyone wants their farm stands updated, then maybe we decide we should strike the proposal. But I'm kind of wondering if doing a half measure and just going through ZBA initially makes more sense, just so we don't accidentally open ourselves up to something we don't foresee. Because I think this clause was written, somebody who wrote this clause had something in mind they were trying to prevent. And I would expect anyway. So that's my thoughts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Jen?
I had some other questions, but actually striking the 51% requirement sort of absolves all of those in general. And so I think that makes sense to me.
I agree with it being struck, and I certainly understand Bennett's concerns with maybe we just have it just sent to ZBA. It's once and then it's done. And there's no other restrictions on it. Let ZBA be the sort of holder for it. I don't agree with having extra work put on the code enforcement officer to try to track these down. That just doesn't make sense. The 51% threshold does not make sense. Is it just a matter of logistically tracking all of this? I mean, the town has far more important things to do, I think. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think striking the 51% is the way to go. And I got to it, I started off where Ben was, and I still kind of have that concern, except that there's enough statement of what the product is. My concern is somebody would start to sell flip-flops, balloons, water equipment, T-shirts, and everything else in the summer. But since that's not there, I think I'm comfortable with striking the 51%. I looked at what seemed to me to be an excessive burden on a farmer who has a 400 square foot farm stand. The technology is available if you want to invest in a lot of computers and programs that you can use a computer to put in what is sold, and it can segregate what's local and what's not, or whatever, whatever it is. But to ask a farmer who gets money off of a 400 square foot farm stand for 10 weeks, I think that was burdensome and unnecessary. I think the special exception starts to get a little fuzzy because every single year, the farmer has to know ahead of time if they're going to be using other products, or if they think they're going to hit 51%. And if they think maybe they're going to be 49%, then they find they're 51%, and all of a sudden they're getting a special exception retroactively. And that might have to happen every single year because basically of the nature of the business. And it seems to me that that's not something that we need that would be helpful to our farmers. You got enough?
So, thank you. I think so.
Okay. Thank you. Next item on the agenda. M&R subject to 4.02, M&R Holdings LLC on behalf of Crossroads Holdings LLC is requesting master plan amendment review for the town center, Scarborough Downs Road, assessors map R052, lot 4 for the town.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This will be the third master plan amendment for the downtown town center. And this request is making a correction to the total acreage that was in previously. It was 140 acres erroneously included. It's actually 160 acres. Their primary request is to increase the impervious cover allowed in the downtown core area from 85% to 90%. The average overall would remain. The core area is 26 acres of the 160 acres. So outlined in red is the downtown core that they're requesting this be amended for. I asked the Downs in their application to give me a look at what's been approved so far, and it's hard to see. But Intermed's at 72% impervious, the Parker and the Cross Street condos is at 71%, 3I is at 81%, and then the mixed use building is at 66%. Just to give you an idea how those averages can be maintained. At this point, staff did not have any real concerns with this. I know that Dan has a presentation that will probably provide much greater detail.
Thank you. And for the applicant, Mr. Bacon.
Great,
Nice article in the Portland Press Herald.
thank you.
That was Rick Meinking. That was not me. I said, nice article. I was going to leave it there.
You didn't like the elevator shafts, is that what you're talking about? All right, thanks. Dan Bacon here on behalf of M&R Holdings and Crossroad Holdings. Thanks for the introduction. As indicated, so I think as the planning board knows, the master plan level sets the space and bulk standards for each of our districts. We actually established this one town center district long enough ago that I don't remember the year. It was actually when WEX was on the table, so it was pre-pandemic. Also before the downtown committee kind of did its process, which is during the pandemic. So a lot's changed since we established the majority of the space and bulk standards, including the impervious coverage. And we've learned a lot, and we've gotten much more deep into kind of programming, especially around what Autumn referred to as the core area, which is really the heart of the town center, where we're planning the primary mixed-use buildings, the square, the green, the Woonerf, the areas that are really catering to people and shared parking and being compact. So after we've gotten into more design, we had our workshop in September and showed you the direction of things. We really discovered that the impervious cover limit of 85% has become a barrier to really executing the details of that programming, just really in the heart of the overall district. Because we're pushing the buildings close together, because we're providing a lot of sidewalk, plaza area for not just pedestrians, but outdoor dining, because we're getting into doing a Woonerf next to a green that actually we think should have artificial turf to last and be usable year-round versus grass. We're discovering that in that kind of limited 26-acre area that we really need to be higher than 85%. And that's the genesis of that. And over the fall, we've really kind of learned that. So as Autumn had up, and I can provide some graphics, but I don't have a lot of graphics that are different than what you had. So maybe if you just put yours back up, Autumn. The 26-acre areas kind of in the center. So it would include where we're planning the Woonerf, the green area, also our mixed-use buildings along Market Street and Downs Road, and the outlying area where we're planning a grocery. So that's 26 acres out of 106. What won't change with this change, I've indicated what would, is we've already designed and permitted and built, for that matter, our stormwater BMPs. So there's already one in place. You saw it on your tour. And there's another one planned that we're going to present to you during subdivision that's already been through DEP permitting. We're not proposing to change those stormwater BMPs. So we're not proposing to increase the overall impervious area of town center. So it's really concentrating our impervious area, not increasing the aggregate, so that we can kind of perform the design that we're planning on in the core of the project. We also think that to demonstrate compliance with our stormwater BMPs and their capacity, like we did in the Innovation District, we'd have a scorecard. So Autumn listed kind of where we're at on some of the sites that are already permitted. We would continue to do that for all of the sites in town center to demonstrate compliance with overall impervious cover per the stormwater BMPs that we've been permitted for through DEP, that we would permit through the town. And I guess lastly, all the other standards are in place. So you have all the other zoning standards that you would use for review, site plan standards that get into landscaping, landscaping area and parking lots, et cetera. And of course your subdivision standards. So I guess to put succinctly, we're directing where we think impervious cover should be within this overall district to really execute the vision for town center in terms of gathering place, the pedestrian space, the walkability, the buildings in close proximity to each other, and then the remainder of town center, especially the outlying areas, would have a lower impervious cover to essentially compensate for that. So I think with that, I'll end there and answer any questions the board has.
Thank you. This is an item that's available for public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment? Is there anybody online? No one online? Nobody here that's jumped up? Public comment period is over. I'm going to turn this over to the board. No particular order. Who would like to go first? Jen?
I have a couple questions. So first of all, the area that was highlighted in red in that graphic, I don't, I understand in theory, this request and agree with it for a number of the areas, particularly those I think that we've already seen permitted or sites like that that are perhaps coming sort of like really at the epicenter of this town center area. But I have a harder time knowing that there's a grocery store project coming that would fall within this area and that too would be subject to the 90% impervious. Is that correct? Do I have that right? Yeah. So, that feels very different to me than what I picture, some of the other parcels that we've looked at here that are multi-use. They do include more sidewalk and plaza space versus a traditional grocery store layout, which I'm guessing, understanding that we haven't seen it yet, the bulk of that impervious area will be taken up by a parking area. And so I think in that case, I know that we also, have other requirements for sort of internal landscaping islands and the such, but that piece is giving me a little bit of pause on this overall area because I think so I don't know if I'm curious what other people think, but if there's like a parcel above a certain size at which, or below a certain size or something like that, where yes, the smaller sites, when you're trying to fit everything on it, I can see that impervious percentage creeping up, and the additional 5% being difficult to achieve. But for larger parcels, that is a little concerning to me. It also understanding that actually the numbers provided, I think, are really helpful in terms of the percent coverage for sites that we've already seen. So probably what you're going to say to this is that those that have come forward haven't been anywhere close to that limit, but we're talking about changing the standard for the zone here, and so that was the first thing that came to mind. Secondly, I can't help but draw similarities between this parcel and what I know about the municipal campus here, for example, which I understand is up against some threshold limits that are sort of limiting or could limit changes or development in the future. And so I'm curious if adjusting that standard for impervious area at this point up front, if you could see any, is that limiting it in any way on the other end in the future? If that makes sense. That's all I have.
Dan, do you have?
In
Any
terms of the
thoughts?
first one, this standard applies to lots, right? So it's not sort of overall. So overall, we'd be fine. If it applied overall and it was the developed area, 85% would work. But since it applies to lots and we're designing, I know you don't see it, like part of the challenge here is we have to do this before we can submit a site plan. So the chronology of this is challenging in that way. So I understand your questions. But that whole area where a grocery is planned, it's designed in unison with all the buildings around it. From a shared drive standpoint, from a sidewalk standpoint, there's sidewalks inside the grocery site and there's sidewalks outside the grocery site that serve that entire area. So if you pull out the grocery out of it, it's not easy just to kind of pick which lots are 85% and which are 90% and get the integrated mixed-use design with shared drives, walkways, coordinated landscape. So that's why we're proposing it in a larger kind of chunk where that whole core area can be designed together and we don't have to worry about and draw artificial kind of lot lines to get at that standard. So that's, I'm trying to explain why I understand your concern about the grocery, but it also, there are standards around landscaped islands and all the other things that ensure it's not just a big parking lot with no trees and no edges and no greenery. So we were anticipating you can lean on all the other standards to ensure it's getting the shade, getting the landscape within the parking, et cetera, that the board's looking for, while enabling it to be designed with the rest of the sites around an impervious cover that's between 85 and 90%. Your second question in terms of the future, I didn't totally follow what it means for future development and impervious cover in the town center. So
I guess it, if you're, if you did an infill development, for example, I don't know, way down the road. If the maximum impervious, I guess perhaps there are other tools to work with, pervious pavement, things like that maybe, but it just seems, I'm just curious about the long-term implications, I guess, of that and what that might mean for development in the future. And I want to clarify something else that you just said. The standard applies to each parcel, correct? Not the area, not the zone overall, right?
yeah, it's a lot coverage per lot. It's
Right.
what we're seeking to go from 85% to 90. Overall, the entire district actually has to be no more than 75%.
Okay.
And my point earlier, which is related, is we've already pre-permitted our stormwater BMPs. So we're not proposing to change those. So we're proposing to have some lots have a bit more coverage, other lots have less coverage. Stormwater going to the BMP is going to be the same as it would be if we weren't changing the lot coverage number. So if you think of it at the aggregate, we're not increasing stormwater or impervious area. We're choosing which lots have a bit more, which lots have a bit less, is my point. So we're trying to concentrate where coverage is most important to achieve the design and then less important. And that's in these core parcels, whatever percent 26 is of 160, within town center.
Okay.
We're basically focusing where impervious would be a little bit higher. And it's not like, it's,
Right, it's 5%.
maybe it's 88 instead of 82, but it matters from a design standpoint.
Okay, thanks.
Roger?
Thank you. Dan, you said that I sound like Rick. You said the 85% was pre-pandemic, right?
Well, that was when we originally got the master. Yep, yeah.
Is this, the 90%, is this the result of your new so-called team?
Yeah, it's a result of the design team that we've hired, we worked with the last year, and came up with this
Okay,
design for the town center.
okay,
Yep.
all right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yep.
I saw Jim Hebert's hand next, and then I saw Ben's, and then I saw Rick's.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Electrical engineer, I'm not a civil engineer. What's the lifespan of a BMP? Do they last forever? Do they need to be replaced or upgraded?
You have to maintain them,
Yeah.
but decades, I mean, It's
Like 20,
core
30 years.
infrastructure, so you would, I don't know, Angela, how long's the BMP last? 50 years?
They're required to annually maintain it and
Okay.
that's reported to the town. If that happens, I would say it's probably 20 years out that they might be replacing media.
Mhm.
Like actually ripping out kind of what's in the base layer for that gravel wetland and kind of replacing. So there is, and that gets sped up if the maintenance is lacking.
Gotcha.
I'll put it that way.
Heard. Is, at that point, when you do need to perform work on the BMP, would that be an opportunity to expand it? Or is it always,
I think it depends on where the development is. We anticipate developing around the BMP, where the BMPs are. One's already in, right? So, and there's sites that are planned to be developed immediate to it, and then there's also a conservation easement. So the one that's in isn't going to be expanded because there's not space to do that. And the one that's planned, same kind of thing. It's along the edge of a conservation area and buffer, so there's no expansion possible there. And we're planning on building development on the other side of it. So they're not intended to be or really planning to expand it.
okay, thank you. I think per Jen's question earlier, I feel like in the future, when this is eventually all going to be redeveloped at some point, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line, I feel like the 95% coverage could be impactful at that point. I guess,
It's 90, just to.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. I realized as soon as I said it. I guess the argument here, it revolves around like the Woonor space, the real down dead center area of the town. So I guess my initial feeling would be I'd allow the expansion to 90% in that space, but not the area where the grocery store and the multi-use structures are going to go on the south side of Scarborough Downs Road, only because, I mean, that is going to be a giant, it is going to be a large, significant national chain grocery store. Has that been signed yet? Do we know who that's going to be, or are we going to find out?
It's find out soon.
Okay. So, a major national grocery chain that's going to go in there, they're going to have a sizable footprint. I mean, I'm just envisioning something like Costco for the size and scope and scale that's going to be in there. So if there's any way that we can just keep that from just being a complete, I guess, spread in that entire area. I know we're talking small percentage points, but those add up over time. And as developers, and I work as an engineer, we always look for how do we maximize the space that we're going to go, and that's just how we plan and we think. And I feel at this, when we're really talking about the downtown green space, this particular area, I'd be much more comfortable allowing it for that space north of Scarborough Downs Road rather than the area that's south of Scarborough Downs Road. Another question I have, at the workshop, I asked about the total occupancy of the green space, what it's planned for the maximum occupancy for like an event or something like that. And the folks you hired, they didn't have an answer for me at that time, but do you have an idea? Or
We're
have you ever
still
calculated
kind of
that?
working on the programming, so I don't have any real more information in terms of the total occupancy.
Okay,
We've been focused on the other areas, before, preparing for site plan review across from the medical office. So we haven't done a lot more work on specifics around that.
okay. I guess when you do come before us with that, that'll be my first question that I want to know is, what's the total capacity of people in that space? I'll also mention, we're wanting to make sure that we have enough adequate space for trails, for bike paths. Don't forget too, we have the 475 feet of trail that we need to make sure we make up for. That was removed, but would be made up later on. And I just want to make sure that those items are eventually addressed and incorporated. So those are all my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
You mentioned kind of sprawling about sort of parking lots and the grocery potentially, and technically the larger the coverage, or the lower the coverage, the more spread out it's going to be. One of the things we've been thinking about is having the right landscape amount and islands, but being as compact as we can with that particular site. So I do think you can actually get the reverse effect to have to just create more lot area to meet the 85%, while it can be counterproductive. So if it's as compact it can be on 90% and you still have the landscape and the proper stormwater, it actually can achieve that goal.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that.
Ben?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking for a little bit of clarity on kind of the percentage ratios for what we're calling different districts. The 75% ratio, that applies to the entire Downs property? Or- okay. A lot of that, is wetlands and stuff. Well, at least sort of south, whatever, east of, plan east of the town center district. So I'm kind of thinking, you're already kind of covering that by not doing anything there anyway, right? I guess what I'm wondering is there anything like, do you actually have to make up any difference, by changing this from 85 to 90 anywhere else? Because it looks to me like that area is already gonna be difficult to develop along like Scarborough Downs Road between Town Center and Innovation District and that whole area. Maybe I'm not understanding the full future plan for that area, but I guess what, I was kind of just wanted some clarity on specifically, the 75% is not just for the town center district, it's for the entire
Development project.
development project.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no real requirement for the overall town center district other than that be part of everything else. So we're really just increasing more. So when you say that you're gonna have to make up for it on other lots, that could be other lots that are far away from the town center. I mean, relatively speaking, on the property. Is that correct?
I was actually referring in town center, where in phase 1, 2, or 3. I was referring to the 85% in terms of the balance. So in those areas where we've designed stormwater BMPs, one's built, one's going to be built, you're going to review it, this over the course of the winter. We've already gotten our DEP permit in terms of how much impervious area can go to them. And we geared it around an 85% coverage, or up to. My point in saying was, we're not going to change those. We're not going to make them bigger, their size for that impervious area. It's either some lots have 90% and some lots have 80, or they all have 80, was my point. We're not increasing overall impervious area. In fact, this area is more in the center, kind of away from the edges, by and large. So often people are concerned overall, what's the total impervious area? What's the total stormwater generated? Can you treat it, et cetera? We're not changing those things. We're changing where it's concentrated. That was my point.
Okay, so could we add a requirement that for the entire quote unquote town center core area, meaning the area that you're trying to bump up the individual lot coverage from a maximum of 85 to 90, could we make that the entire area which you highlighted, could that whole area still have a maximum of 85 total?
The aggregate.
The aggregate be 85 for the same area that you're trying to make the individual lots be 90. But this way you wouldn't be able to make all of the lots 90. Because right now, with the way it's written, it looks like you can make up for your 90 to 85 elsewhere in the whole Downs project. So that's why I'm thinking, what if we made the limit 85 just for the town center core area, which it already kind of is. If the limit is 85 for the area, you can't get over 85 anyway. So if you want to concentrate certain ones, that just sort of requires you to make the lots in the town center core area, which was the red highlighted area, some of them have to be less than 85. If you're gonna have some of them more than 90, or some of them more than 85, so have to be less than 85. You see what I'm saying? In order to make, if we add that requirement, then we are I don't know, we're not allowing every lot in there to be 90 coverage.
You saying in the highlighted area, or you're saying in overall town center district? We've designed the overall town center district where there's development planned to have a maximum of 85% coverage overall. We're looking, and I think we'd be open to, if the idea is in the core area, this limited 26 acres, you can go to 90, but that means the remainder area has to be lower than 85 so that it nets out at 85. Is that
I think
is that
that's,
where you're-
I think that's kind of what I was trying to tease out whether we wanted to, whether we could make that the town center core district or the full town center district. So I know this is why the districts, terms of districts gets a little confusing if you're not looking at it carefully.
Yeah.
So I guess if you don't think you could pull off the 80, whatever, the maximum of 85 for the quote, town center core district, at least for the town center district, that would be probably better.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the only requirement is that you have 75% or less in the entire Scarborough Downs area, in which case you have a lot of area where you could, where it could be easily made up for. And I'm trying to, not thinking about just your project here, but anything in the future as well, that I'd like to have a way to ensure that if we're gonna be making this change, that we can, you know, still have a reasonable amount of green space that's required in, even in the town center district.
Mhm.
So you could live with that and with making,
Yeah, within the district, we
Yeah.
could live with, in the developed area, you know,
Yeah.
not counting I'm not talking about open space or wetland
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that clear, Autumn?
Let,
little
let,
confusing.
just let me suggest that, that would involve a pretty extensive motion change to what we have. And if we get it wrong, if we're sitting here trying to develop something that's pretty complicated, if we get it wrong, all of a sudden, we might find out it doesn't work for us or it doesn't work for them. So while the idea is good, I'm trying to think about how we would get that into a motion if that's something we wanted to have done, whether it should happen now, or perhaps if this application were withdrawn, it could come, if that was if it seemed as though the board was interested in seeing something like that, I wouldn't ask them to withdraw a motion that, the board is basically happy with, to get the tweaking. So I'm not sure parliamentary procedure, in terms of parliamentary procedure or anything else, sanity, I guess, how we would implement that. I think it's a good idea. I see Autumn writing something down. I hope I hope your
I'm not.
handwriting is better than Eric's.
Not sure I understand, but to recap, you're thinking that you would make a motion to increase the impervious area from 85% to 90% for the 26 acre core.
For each lot.
Well, that's okay.
Right,
That's
but
the
yes,
amendment.
yep.
So that stays, but in return, you would propose to decrease the amount of impervious acreage for the remainder of the town center to 80%?
No, I would add a requirement that for the town center district that no greater than 85%.
That already exists. That's what it is already.
Well,
There's an overall, so the downtown, the town center, the 160 acres, right now, the maximum impervious cover is 85%
per lot.
per lot. Right. And overall.
And overall?
Yeah.
So there's two well, because it's per lot.
Right.
But if
The
you're,
overall ratio applies to the entire development, which is 75%, and that includes everything.
that's
So
what
you're
I'm getting at, is if you add in a requirement that specifically states overall for the town center district, that requires them in the town center district to have some lots now be less than 85, whereas before they could have made every lot 85.
I don't know. I
I
don't
think
see the.
what you're, right now, what
point.
they're proposing is actually 75 overall. So
Right.
you're actually increasing the amount of impervious area.
75 is for larger than the town center district, though. It's for the entire.
That's for the entire thing, but each lot can go up to 85% right now. each lot can be up to 85% impervious in the entire 160 acre town center district. So
Mhm.
what they're asking for is that those 26 acres, each lot in that district can go up to 90%. So if you want to allow the 90% and those 26 acres, are you proposing to decrease the per lot impervious cover in the, that's what I'm struggling to understand. We're talking about 1.3 acres maximum, if they maxed it out for the 26 acres, that's what we're talking about for impervious. If everything.
Like an increase, is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
I guess what I'm struggling to understand is that the 75% ratio doesn't apply just to the town center district. It applies to the whole project.
Right.
There's
Whole-
no other requirement that I know of, maybe I'm mistaken, that requires the 85% overall for the town center district. It's implied because you have 85% per lot. Is that correct, or am I
Can
wrong?
ask- Maybe Dan can clarify, but
Sure.
your DEP permit requires the 85%, right, for the district,
Yeah,
for this,
For the developed area in the district.
but
Yeah.
not for, to Ben's, his point was not for the entire downs, right? It's for this subdivision essentially, or no?
Yeah, for,
So getting to what you were saying, there is a provision, it's maybe not locally, it's with DEP, is that correct?
it is. Yeah, I mean, similar to it.
Yeah.
They weren't a lot involved in Innovation District, but there's some parallels, at least Angela understands, where we tracked lots because there was actually two different standards in Innovation District. There was, it was either 85 and 90 or 80 and 85. And overall, Innovation District, not every lot could get to 85, to the maximum coverage. So what we did with the planning board and Angela's team is we recognized that and said, some lots, it's important to be a little bit more coverage than others. So, and we know that have a DEP permit, we know we have planning board approval, we sized our stormwater for a certain amount of stormwater. So we did a scorecard and we just track them, and every time you submit a site plan, it says, what's your coverage? Is it 85? Is it 80? Is it 79? And we keep track, and then we could demonstrate compliance with something that you're kind of driving at to say, okay, you're concentrating some lots and you go into 90 here in just these core areas. Overall, you're still in compliance with the DEP approval and the 85% coverage for the entire
And that's
developed
something-
area of the district.
And that's something we work closely with DEP on. It's actually part of their DEP permitting, is that the town is tracking it locally for them because we're their eyes on the ground. So, so to that point, we also had the conversation is with the Innovation District, and there's a lot of little lots, that it's really at their risk because they're gonna paint themselves in the corner. They might end up with 3 lots left that they can't build on because they're out of impervious area. You know what I mean? So I think that was the conversation we had early on.
Right.
Obviously, they need to, it's their risk and they need to plan it out, knowing, oh, I gave this much to this lot. It just diminishes their overall for their future lots. So it kind of, like I said, if they're not watching it closely, they could paint themselves in the corner, and they knew that going into it. Is that fair?
I got it.
Yeah.
I think I understand. So this is my proposal. I think I.
And,
understand what you
and
want.
just so folks know, since we haven't finished the comments from the board, this is something that you all board members keep thinking about as a possible amendment to the draft that you have in front of you. And Rick still has a chance to speak, and I have a chance to speak, but Autumn, would you read what you've got, please?
So the proposal amends the existing town center master plan at the Downs by increasing the maximum impervious area for the 26 acre town center core from 85% to 90%. The overall town center master plan area, 160 acres, shall maintain an average of 85% impervious area. The overall CPD ratio of 75% shall remain.
That's what I was looking for.
Okay, thank you. Rick?
Yeah, with all the conversations, all very helpful, and I'm glad we had this dialogue. Where I'm coming out on this is, it all goes back to what's been permitted by DEP, so I'm comfortable allowing the flexibility, knowing that they can't have too much impervious or the DEP permit will be in violation and therefore everybody gets in trouble. So I'm comfortable, and I'm comfortable with the amended language. It does put a little bit of extra teeth in it for those that aren't innately accustomed to reading and having to deal with land planning. This makes it understandable for the majority. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This is something that Dan mentioned, and it's the cart before the horse. I'm really, and Jen brought it up as well. I hate to increase the impervious surface for an area where I don't know what's going to go on. We've been told a food market, a grocery store, a retail area, another retail mixed-use building, all of the land, all of the activity around the town center. That's a big blank, and folks who understand are taking a look at early maps, see a space in the ocean where it says, here there be dragons. In other words, we don't know what's here, but it's possible that it's something that's dangerous or unwanted. I don't really have a problem going to the 90% for the area immediately around the open space, where the WUNRF is and where there's going to be programming in the turf area. But you're coming to us and asking for the whole 26 acres. And that's 1.3 acres addition. And I don't really hear promises to how that's going to be handled. And what happens when the grocery store is there. And we've been through this before. All of a sudden, we have a building that's just a little too big, and then all of a sudden, we need more spaces for the parking lot because, well, the building is bigger. And all of a sudden, we hear well, we're really going to have to go to 90% for all of this area. And I am very reluctant and actually would not vote to go to 90% for this whole area. So it makes me queasy. It's a blank check on 90%. And I understand there's a little bit of a guardrail here and there's a little bit of a guardrail there and the DEP and we would take a look and we would make sure that something isn't going to happen, but you get a building comes in and the owner wants to put something else in and all of a sudden you're squeezed, we're squeezed. And we're presented with well, yeah, it's 90% here in where the open space is. And right here, we got to have 90%. And then over here, we got to have 90%. And I don't want to do that. That's my comment. We have there's no other, okay, I've got two people who want to rebut, Roger and Jen.
I just have a question for staff based on your thoughts. Could you remind us how the new guidelines for low impact development would relate here?
We are required to have those in place next year, which I assume this application will be in front of it, so it won't have those requirements.
Okay, thank you.
I would assume your timing is probably ahead. I guess that's a question for the applicant.
Yeah, I mean, and your next agenda would come in for subdivision, for this next area, and then over the course of the winter, be going through site plan review, on these sites. And, I'm not sure how the LID standards relate to applications that have a DEP approval. Part of low impact development is obviously stormwater component that we have through DEP and would want to utilize. You know, the gravel wetland that we've already permitted that the town's been encouraging so far in terms of technology. I do think the site plan review ordinance is pretty strong guardrail. Personally, I mean, you have a lot of authority under site plan for landscaping and any number of things, and have been updating your ordinances regularly. So pervious cover is one of many things that we have to contend with. We're just trying to have the ability to proceed with a coordinated plan. And I get the point that this is before you get to see it. So I don't know how to overcome that unless we're gonna take things out of order. But I think that the design will be very compatible, and I think it's what, you know, what we presented at the workshop, and that's what we're trying to achieve, you know, from September. So it's important to have the ability to proceed with this, and then if there needs to be ratcheting down, no, I don't like that, Dan, it needs to be 86%, or you need to add some landscaping because it's not achieving what you need from a greenery standpoint or buffering parking. That's what we expect to do over the course of the winter. So what we want to be able to do is be able to apply and proceed with something that we think ultimately works really well in a coordinated master planned way for the 26 acres.
Roger?
Thank you. I appreciate all the comments and concerns that my colleagues have here. But when I look at this town center is the critical component of the whole development, I think, and at least the way the town envisions it to be. And when we had the recent workshop where your new team was there, and I noted a change in direction, or strategy at least. And I don't think this would be before us if it wasn't for the intentions of the new strategy, the new team. And so that's where I'm leaning. I mean, I can see the concerns that everybody has expressed here, but this is very important, and I think they have an idea what they want to do and a strategy for doing it. And like I said, they wouldn't be before us to make this change. And I do, you know, it's an acre, a little over an acre. Personally, I can live with that. I'm not, you know, I just think it's very important for this town center to be very successful. And I give actually the you know, Riz Barras and the Michos and Dan credit for actually reaching out to another consulting, you know, outside consultants to come in and take a look at this, because up until this point, they've been making a lot of decisions based on what their own knowledge and things like that. And so you know, I'm concerned that we're trying to micromanage this too much, this core center, and we got to leave it to these people to you know, to follow up their plan. And I just think it's important, and a lot is riding on this. And I won't say any more. I guess that's how I feel.
Thank you. There we go. Autumn, do you have something I can read? And notice what I asked you. Can I read it? Okay. Yes, it's better than Eric, bless his heart, could not write something. Anyhow, I move to approve the project titled the Downs Town Center Master Plan Amendment proposed by Crossroads Holding LLC. The project is depicted in application materials dated October 2024. The proposal amends the existing town center master plan at the Downs by increasing the maximum impervious area for the 26-acre town center core from 85% to 90%. The overall town center master plan area, 160 acres, shall maintain 85% impervious area. The overall 75% ratio within the planned development district land area shall remain in effect. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Doreen, call the roll.
Rick King,
Yes.
No.
Roger Bailey,
Yes.
Rachel Hendrickson,
No,
and James Hebert.
No.
motion fails. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, minor development reviews. Staff?
Before we get into those, I did want to take a moment to welcome our new planner. Helen Harmon has joined us. Today is her first day. She was greeted with a shorter planning board meeting, so thank you all. Building permit starts of construction. We are out of our single family rate of growth permits for the R2, RF, R3, and R4 districts. Those will re-up on July 1 of next year. So we'll only have 25 of those per year. And we are out. We do have 5 available for one-off homes, not in subdivisions. Certificates of occupancy completion, the Parker at the Downs has completed 2 of 4 buildings. I suspect the other 2 will be completed by the end of the year. Myself and my code enforcement, our zoning administrator rather, we're going to do a lighting review at Costco, Wednesday. I wanted to do it when it was dark at 5, so I only had to wait a little bit
We're
longer.
gonna have to stay up late now.
Yeah, so we'll do that before the council meeting. The council is considering a moratorium this Wednesday on the light industrial district. That would, if approved, would go back to a November 1st date. It would not affect pending applications, FedEx, for example, the way that that is written. And then our next meeting will be December 16th. For minor development reviews, I do not have any in process.
Can I add a
Okay.
staff comment? I don't know.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I also just wanted to just make the board aware that on December 4th workshop, which is because we won't meet before then, the council workshop, there's a few things happening. One is there's a workshop at 5:30 with council with the transportation committee, and we'll be going over a presentation for our draft townwide transportation assessment that the committee's been working on for the past year. So there'll be feedback around that. So everyone's encouraged to kind of provide feedback. I know this board in particular is very tuned in to transportation as it comes to development and around town. So I think it would be encouraging for you guys to take a look at it and provide comment. And then the other thing to note on the December 4th council, so not this week, the next one, is the wetland protections first reading. And if that is moved forward by council, it would be coming to the planning board at your next meeting. So that would be looking at setbacks from wetlands for new and redevelopment areas.
That was the December 4th workshop, the transportation stuff. Thank you, Angela.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Do we have administrative amendment reports? None?
We have the Portland
Yeah.
Rugby Club has proposed an amendment. Sorry, it didn't work. They've proposed a reduction in the pitch size so they can do some changes for retaining wall requirements. And they proposed removing the fence on the adjacent property owner's site. That's in review right now.
Yeah, and just so folks know, I took a look at it. The owners of the adjacent properties have indicated there's no problem with the removal of the fence. What putting up a fence would have done would been taken down quite a few mature trees. So yeah, that's it, and it is a reduction in size. So I told the staff it was in their purview to handle. Correspondence?
Not this time.
All right, planning board comment. Roger?
Yes, I just wanted to mention, I had the occasion to be out on, Roger Road a few days ago, and, I had some board members maybe remember there was a development for homes in a gravel pit. I think it's called Peaceful Acres or something like that. And if you have a chance, if you were on the sidewalk when we did it, I think we've all wondered how they're gonna do this. And it's actually, have you seen it?
It's very peaceful out there.
But they've done a nice job.
That's good.
They've
It
done a nice job.
Yeah, I can second what Roger said because when I drove by there, I said, "What's that?" And then they've actually made something of it, and I was rather skeptical at the time. Anybody else comments?
And I should note, they'll be on the council agenda too for the December 4th meeting for street acceptance for Peaceful Lane.
Any other comments? I just want to remind folks that when we speak up about projects that have already been built or have questions about code, the planning board really isn't the place to ask that. If you have a concern about a code issue, direct it specifically at code. Autumn has an awful lot to do with not a lot of staff, and she needs the ability to schedule them and direct them. And when something comes up at a public hearing and the public has a chance to take a look at it, usually the public then expects something to be done then. And that's not fair to the staff. So I just ask, if you do have concerns about how something is proceeding, please talk to Autumn. If it's something that's already done, if you have a concern about how we're operating, talk to me. And it's simply a matter of courtesy, that's all. The other thing that the long range is part of my work with the Long Range Planning Committee. There is a moratorium, as Autumn said, on the zoning out there. And I should also bring to your attention, you might want to take a look at the meeting. There was a lot of questions devolved around the use of sewer and water on the other side of the turnpike. And I know that we had that discussion when FedEx came up. So just so you know, the discussion was carried to the Long Range Planning Committee. There was nothing decided. It was a good discussion, airing a lot of issues, raising a lot of concerns, pros, cons. So it was a pretty good meeting and pretty good airing of that discussion. Anybody else have anything from their committees? No? Do I hear a motion to adjourn? I think, Jen, go ahead, it's your turn.
So moved.
Jen,
So you read first.
Jen reached first. Roger, you reached second. Doreen?
Mine King,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rachel Henriksen.
Yes,
And James Hebert.
Yes.
you're adjourned. Thank you. And please note the time.
Not bad.
And while this is not part of the meeting, time is going to be pretty hefty.
Break is over. So have a turkey and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
At least it's only once a month now. It's better than every 3 weeks like we were at, man. That was,
Rhythm, like I had no idea. The family was like, what? You have another?
Oh, now I gotta pick it, but yeah.